Hello, friends. I hope this finds you well. I am so excited to share with you about animal communication and welcome to, I guess we're going to call this Explore Animal Communication Coffee Chat. I have my little Apollo mug here, who is, if you don't know me, uh, one of my horses. He is a formerly wild horse. He came from the Warm Springs Reservation in the Central Oregon area. And this is one of the quotes that he said. And he said, "We are all magic just waiting to be dusted upon the earth." And it's like, it's something that I love to remind myself. And, in a mug form is so nice because it reminds me that no one person or being is more special than another. We're all magic, and most of us are holding ourselves back from being dusted upon the earth because not always is someone going to come and do the dusting for us. We are the ones that are going to need to be the catalyst in order to share whatever it is that we are here to do. And if you are watching this, likely an animal in your life is likely part of that catalyst for you. And I'm going to share part of my own story of my dog who is napping just outside the camera here, and how he has been that catalyst, how he has helped me recognize my own magic and also help me in starting to share it with the world around me. So, with that being said, I'm Emma. I am an animal communicator. I am an animal energetic healer and teacher, and just a little bit about me. So, I have been communicating with animals for about 5 years. And so, this is mid 2024 is when we are recording this. And I've communicated on more than in more or on more than 1,000 sessions, and have communicated with animals in 14 countries. And I think that the one of the things that's really interesting when we start talking about communicating in different languages or different countries, because is there a language barrier and what does that look like? In my experience, there's rarely a language barrier because honestly, what we're what we're what we're communicating with, at least in the way that I'm communicating, is really through the energy of that being with the soul of that being, which is transcendent of any language. And so it can be shown and it can show up in whichever way it needs to in order for that information, for that message to be given, right? To be transferred. And however, if the person, right, on the other side, the person who is the caretaker of that animal does not speak the language in which you speak, which could be English or could be a million other languages, that's going to be unhelpful, right? Because their messages are not going to be heard or seen or taken in because the human is unable to because of a language barrier. So when I say 14 countries, yeah, the people in those countries all spoke English in some capacity. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult for us to have this kind of conversation, for me to be able to be the conduit to share the messages of their animals with them. Because if they can't understand what I'm saying, then what is the point, right? And something that I will just share now is that I don't view people of, the caretakers, the guardians of animals. I don't use the word owner. That's not a thing in my vocabulary. It's not how I view my relationship with my animals. And hopefully through this video, through this chat, through the work that you do in the world, you can start to see and use different vocabulary also, because owner to me is very much domineering, and that there's not this two-way communication, right? When I think of ownership, I think of like inanimate objects, right? Something that doesn't have a voice, something that can't speak back, something that doesn't have desires, something that doesn't want to communicate or can communicate, right? And animals do communicate, do want to have a voice, and do have many desires, and also things that they like and dislike. And so if we can start to see ourselves as guardians, as caretakers, as beings who are here to be in connection and partnership with the animals around us, then we're likely going to have a more ease-filled relationship with those animals and a more deep understanding and deep connection with those animals. And so again, if you are listening to this, if you are watching this, then you are likely one of those people that does desire, if you don't already, desire to have a deep connection, a relationship with your animal or animals, right? Which don't have to be only one species, can be multitude of species. All right, I've gotten off track already. I've communicated with domestic and wild animals, though I will say domestic is really more my specialty, in the sense that that is where I feel more called to. So I feel called to have those connections, those communications, those conversations with the animals that are living with humans. Because a lot of times there are so many miscommunications that are happening between the animal and the human. And so how can I help bridge that connection, that gap, that divide that might be existing, so that they can have a better interaction, they can have a better relationship, they can have a better overall life with one another and individually, because there's this deeper understanding. So yes, you likely will know if you have an affinity more for wild animals, versus I know some people who like connecting with wild animals is just like no big deal. Like I know somebody who has had communications with a hive of bees, right? Like none's better or worse. They're all perfect. They're all great. And most of what will come from animal communication is trusting that whatever it is that it is, whatever that comes easiest to you is true and real, and that we're not questioning ourselves every step of the way of, is this right? Well, I thought it should be this, or it needs to look this other way, or it needs to be with these other animals, or whatever the thing that we're telling ourselves, instead of being able to accept and ground into and have full compassion and rootedness in our way of doing it. Because something that I think is really important that I'll just like put out right now is that there's not one way to communicate with animals. There are infinite ways of communicating with animals. And one of the things that I see or have seen with animal communication classes or courses or clinics or whatever the case may be is that the person leading it is teaching their way of communicating. And that might not be your way of communicating. It doesn't mean you can't communicate that way. And it might be that it's not the way that comes the easiest to you. It's not the most natural way for you to communicate. And if we're not leaning into the thing that's most ease-filled for us, most effortless, we're going to miss the full magic, right, of what our gift actually is. Because maybe I'll get into this. I don't know. We're just going to see where this goes. But the way that one of my biggest barriers into animal communication was this kind of vision or this mentality of, I thought animal communication only looked one way, or it could only be one way, or only certain people could do it. And through my own self-discovery process and my own animal communication journey, I learned There's so many ways, and my way is likely not going to be your way, or like not my exact way is not going to be your exact way, and your exact way is not going to be somebody else's exact way. And so how can we give permission to everyone to find and to uncover and to reconnect to their own way of communicating? And that is the thing that I think is so potent and so beautiful, because when we give ourselves permission to be ourselves, we become brighter, more magic-filled beings. And I fully believe that when we become our truest selves, we make the world a better place, because the ripple effect of you stepping into you is unknown. You can't know all of the people that you touch by you being authentically you, because you might just say one thing to somebody that is authentic to you. It was very transparent. It was something that you're not even thinking of, right? It's not something you're intending to put a stamp on someone's life, but that's the thing that does it. And you just can't know. And we don't need to know. It's just a matter of knowing that when we do the best for ourselves, we're doing the best for so many others as well. All right. So back to who I am. I've communicated with so many different kinds of animals. That was another thing that I just wasn't quite sure about. I wasn't sure if animal communicators only could communicate with one kind of animal, or if they could communicate with different animals, and what did that look like, and was it different, and did it take different skills or whatnot. And so I have found for me it's the same skill. I really didn't question myself very much when I did start to go down this path. It was more of, well, if I can communicate with a dog, then why couldn't I communicate with a cat? And if I can communicate with a cat, why can't I communicate with a horse? And that was just kind of my mentality, is like, well, if I can do this, why couldn't I do this? And if I can communicate with animals, why couldn't I communicate with spirit? And this was the path that I really took. And it was those were my breadcrumbs that I had to follow and that I wanted to follow in order to come more into this gift and to see who I truly was underneath all of this, and what it was pulling me towards and what it was calling me to. So animals that I've communicated with, different species, dogs, cats, horses, also bunnies and guinea pigs and pigs and alpacas and mules and donkeys, and even a snake. I think that's most of them. Oh, goats also, a tortoise. There's usually, there's such a multitude of them that it can be easy to, and I don't mean this in any negative way, but it can sometimes, you can forget to add or remember. Because for me, when I'm communicating with an animal, I am not the one communicating, right? I am a conduit. I am the messenger. I am not the creator. And therefore, I do not remember. There are going to be things that like just stick to my mind, because when it comes through, I'm like, whoa, that is intense. Like, we all need to hear that. And there's so many things that by the time I'm done with a communication, I likely will remember about 50% of it. About an hour later, especially if I've already done another communication, we're down to like 25 to 10%. By the next day, I maybe remember like 2 to 5% of that reading. And it may be the thing that I remember is the energy of the animal. So when people come up to me later on, they're like, oh, I did so and so, or I did this thing with my animal, or my animal's like, we did this together. And they're like saying it in a way of like, right. And I have to respond like, wait, what does that mean? Like, wait, tell me more. Like, why? Like, why did you do that? And they're like, well, they said da da da. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Like, I don't remember. And it's not because your animal doesn't leave an impression. It's that I'm not creating it. And so therefore I'm not taking it in. My brain is not working during that session, because my work is to take my brain out of it so that I can become this conduit. I can become this channel that allows this free flowing of the animal's energy and messages and emotions, everything to come through and not be marred by my own. And why after sometimes clients will receive an audio recording where my brain is not working. I am trying to think of words and they're not coming through because my brain has been shut off for that duration of that reading. And so that is the goal of animal communication, is to become the conduit, to become that empty channel that gets to be the messenger of the animal to the person, and not the creator. If you're the creator, then it's not from the animal, right? But if you are the messenger, if you're the conduit, then it's coming straight from the animal through you to the person in whatever modality or way that you end up doing that. Okay. I love where this is taking us, honestly. Okay. So I have learned, and maybe you have seen, that communicating with animals is my soul's calling. It's something I will always come back to. It's something that comes easy to me. It's effortless. And we call that a clue, right? If something is easy for you and it's effortless for you, that's likely something you're meant to be doing. Maybe if you love, like, the thing that you're doing, it comes easy to you, but you're very frustrated or angry or irritated or bitter in the situation in which you're doing it. Well, that is also a clue of likely that situation, that environment is not what you are meant to be a part of. And the thing that you are doing in that environment is the thing. So it's finding the new environment, the new situation in order for that to thrive. So this is something that I have at times put no energy into marketing, no energy into telling people about it, and people have naturally come to me. And so it's something that I have known for so long that it is my soul's calling. It's not something I want to walk away from, because I couldn't. I wouldn't want to, and it's so deep and part of who I am that I couldn't imagine my life without it, and without getting to share it, and without it being part of my day-to-day kind of interaction with life. Okay. So my story and how I have found my way to animal communication is a little bit different than maybe what you are expecting or what you assume. Because I always assumed if you communicate with animals, like, that's something you've always known since a kid, right? You grew up knowing it, you grew up doing it. Like, it was just something that you knew about yourself. It's not something that was created or cultivated later on. I didn't know that I didn't even know animal communication was a thing until I was in my early 30s. Actually, I didn't know it was a thing. Late 20s, early 30s. And then from there, it just kind of unfolded. So for me, my animal communication came to the surface as I became self-absorbed in my own personal journey. When I started to learn about myself, when I took understanding who I was really seriously, which for me at the time, I was working in corporate, and I learned about coaches and that you could have all these different types of mentors. And I dove in headfirst. And I had at least 4 coaches at one time for at least a year. Like, throughout that year, I had at least 4 coaches. They weren't always the same 4 because different programs ended, but I was like accumulating coaches because I just really wanted to know about myself. And it was through this accumulation of coaches and desire to uncover who I truly was so I could live as that person in my life that I found my way to animal communication, that I understood and I was drawn to, well, I just want to know more about, like, I want to be able to connect more with animals and with nature and the outside world. Like, I don't know what that's going to look like, but I just really want to understand that in my life. I want to bring that more into my life. And it was through that I was brought into another group that essentially that group gave me permission to try to communicate with animals. And it was through that group that I did. And I just started, and it came so effortlessly. And I was just it brought me so much joy that I just wanted to keep going and keep doing it, and was like waiting for the people in the group to like post more animals, or to also communicate with the animals that were already in the group so I could see what they got, to see what, and compare it to what I got, and like all the things. I was just like, I just couldn't get enough. And so I started reaching out to all my friends and being like, hey, this might sound weird, but I'm communicating with animals, and I'd really love like more practice. Would you mind if I practiced with your cat or with your horse or with whatever? And people were so receptive, and it was so amazing. And it's honestly one of like the best parts of my journey, like was during that time. All right. So for me, like I said, one of my biggest catalysts in my life is my dog, Ranger. And he was, he brought me into the self-discovery kind of journey, in the sense that ever since I'd gotten him, he was always a very anxious and stressed out dog. He, if we went to public places, he would be like shaking the whole time. His tail would be tucked. Like even going for walks could be really scary, especially if there was something sitting out on the sidewalk. It was like, could not go any further, or would need to like cross the street to go by it, would be shaking. Like, and that was stressing me out. That got my attention, because I was like, oh my gosh, if you are so stressed all the time, you're stressing your body out all of the time. And therefore you're going to have like not only like a shorter life expectancy, but like poor quality of life. And that was killing me. And so that brought me to animal communication. Anyway, he was my first animal that I communicated with, I think. One of the first animals I communicated with. And I asked him, what are you the most scared of? Because my logical brain at the time said if he could tell me what he was the most scared of, whether it be, loud noises or people or public places, like that would be something that we could help with, right? Like that would give me something to say, okay, we can train towards that, right? We can create a program that can help you in that capacity. And what he said, so when I said, what are you the most scared of? He said that you're not going to learn the lessons that I am here to teach you. And my whole life changed in that moment. Not once before that moment did I have a conscious thought that my animals were here to teach me something that is deeper than maybe something like patience or getting outside. That they were here to teach me very profound messages. And what he said he was here to teach me is to love myself more than others, to be present, and to trust myself. Which to some may sound super simple. To me, up until that moment, I didn't realize you could not love yourself. I thought it was like breathing. It was like a given. It wasn't something that couldn't not exist. And during my journey, I really ended up learning so much about so many things, but one of them being self-love was not really part of my everyday life. It was something I was searching for externally. And so the more that I stepped into those lessons and learned those lessons, the less anxious he got. And if you are ever thinking or wondering why your animal isn't getting better, whether it's through injury or illness or behavior, and you've tried all sorts of different things, I would ask you, what is it that they are trying to teach you? What message are they trying to get across through their language, whatever that language is, right? Because animals are going to get our attention in whatever way they need to so that they can get that message across. And it can feel very harsh to us because we're like, well, how dare you take these extreme measures? Why couldn't you say it to me in a softer way? And and they say, I tried and you didn't listen. And I kept trying and you didn't listen. And therefore, I had to keep escalating the behavior, the illness, the injury. I had to prolong it until I could get your attention to shift yourself or your perception. And so they are amazing. If we are able to see them for who they are and not who we think they are supposed to be or they should be, but who they truly are, so much of our life can be transformed in like such beautiful, magical ways. All right. So let's talk about what is animal communication exactly, right? What is this thing that we might have preconceived notions on, right? I shared how I had preconceived notions of animal communication. So my preconceived notions were it could only look a certain way, right? It was people talking to animals and telling you what they were saying. And whether that was in person or over the phone or something, but it was like this very kind of interactive type situation where I was very much a part of the process as the human. And I have learned through my own process that, and you know, when I'm like working with others to help them understand and reconnect with their own animal communication abilities, we use human design. And human design is a tool. It is your authentic blueprint. It is a treasure trove of information of who you are. It is your authenticity at your core that is likely buried under layers and layers of conditioning that we have taken on throughout our life, that the world, that society, our caretakers have told us that we are supposed to be a certain way. You should do life in this way. You should show up like this. You're supposed to be a good person and therefore put yourself last. Right? Whatever these kind of conditioning, these notions, these beliefs that we have taken on that have been hindering to our own self to say, you need to make yourself smaller potentially in order to be more accepted in the world, right? The pieces, the beliefs, the understandings, the ideas that have shrunk who we truly are so that others could be comfortable. So human design is a tool that allows us to see what is underneath that conditioning. Who is it that we came here to be? And it is one of those things that you take what resonates and leave the rest. But there's aspects and there's lots of different things throughout that chart, throughout your chart, that we can look at to see and give us insight into how you might potentially more easily or effortlessly connect in with animals. And when I was talking about how, like, my own story and connection and journey with animal communication, how I didn't know I could do it until later in life, until I became self-absorbed in my own process, is very much a 2 in the profile, right? So if you're looking at your chart, there'll be something called the profile, and it's going to have 2 numbers. If you have a 2 in your profile, you might be like me, where this gift doesn't come to the surface until later on in life, until you have really committed to yourself and learning yourself and understanding yourself. Another aspect of this is that those who have a 2 are likely going to want to do it by themselves. They don't like to be interrupted when they're doing something, when they're using their gift. And that was something I found to be true for myself, that I didn't like doing it live or in person because I view the animal as my client and not the human. The human gets to be part of it, right? They get to submit whatever they're wanting to learn from their animal, and we take it from there. But the animal is who gets to be front and center and gets to have my full attention. We are not going back and forth between the person and the animal. The animal gets to have center stage, all the light, and we get to be in that space together for the entirety of the reading. And I find for me, it allows us to go deeper because that's my natural state of how my gift likes to be used. And so it's things like that that we can start to look at different parts and aspects of a chart in order to see what is likely going to be more comfortable, more effortless for you. What's going to allow your gift to be shining at the brightest capacity than doing it the way that you think you're supposed to. So animal communication, it was like such a sidebar, but animal communication essentially is having a conversation with an animal, right? So I like to see animal communication as a two-way communication, right? So it's not only that you're receiving information from them, but that you're also giving information back. So a lot of people can hear animals in whatever way that might look for them, and may have more difficulty than responding with information in return. So animal communication can be one way, right? It can be that you're receiving information from them and that you're not necessarily giving anything back. However, I think more complete animal communication in the sense of every party getting to have their voice being heard and understood is being able to then impart and give information back to them in some capacity, right? Which doesn't always have to be words. It can be energy, it can be emotion. So animal communication is this very general thing. It can take so many different shapes and avenues in order to get there, right? I think that there can be kind of animal communication from more of a physical standpoint, right? So their physical interaction in life. So are they focusing more on how their physical body is having an experience in this lifetime? So it might be physical ailments that they're incurring, or how they like their person to do a certain thing for them, or the more 3D, the more physical kind of interactions of life, their favorite toys and foods and people or friends, the things that they love to do the most in life. Like those things I see as more of like the physical realm, the physical side of animal communication. And then the other is more of like the energetic side. So I see that as more of like what's driving them, right? So okay, maybe their favorite game is hide and seek, but like what's driving that? Or maybe their favorite being is, the dog down the street, but like why? Like the energetic is like the soul communication. It's like the 5D side of things. So it can be the lessons, right? Like, what are you here to teach me? It's more of the like, if you're looking at it from your perspective, like your higher self, right? Their soul. Like, let's get down to the nitty gritty. And a communication can have both for sure, right? It can have the physical as well as the energetic. But I see them as two kind of separate, different things. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. So let's see. Let's talk about how the ways in which we can communicate, right? So this is where I want to leave you with something to potentially explore on your own and see the different ways that it could occur for you, and to try out what that might look like for you. All right. So one of them, which I think it might be the most well-known, is telepathy, right? So telepathy being that you're connected. So it might be that you hear them in your head, or you just know that something's happening, or that they feel a certain thing, or that they want a certain thing. You just know, or you can hear them, you can feel them, but it's this connection that you have. And telepathy can really happen in like all of the, basically what we're going to share beneath this, sorry, like after this. But telepathy is that connection, and it can look so many different ways, and it can happen in person, but it can also happen, thousands of miles away from each other. So I would say the first two are the most common that I see, which is in person. So in person communication would be you going to the animal, or the animal coming to you, and you sitting with the animal. I froze. Okay, we're back. You being with the animal, you sitting with the animal, standing with the animal, however, interacting with the animal, that is how you're communicating. You are there presently with them, and you are likely connected in some kind of telepathy or some kind of way that you're then sharing that information with the person who's likely with you during that session. The next is like live in the sense that over the phone or over Zoom, where you're then connecting with the animal, whether the animal is also live on Zoom with you or you have an image with them or like with you on your side that then you see or are talking to the human on the other side, and you are talking and conversing and sharing what the animal is sharing with you. Another way is through meditation, which is how I communicate with animals. I communicate right here, actually, on my bed. And I connect in, I open the space, and I use an image to connect in with the animal. And they come through in lots of different ways. And it's through that meditation that I'm then having that conversation with them. And like I shared already, I don't have the person with me. So the person that the animal's person is somewhere else. I let them know that I'm starting, and then I let them know when I have finished. And in some instances, I reach out during the session because the animal might ask a question that feels really important for them to have the answer right then and there. The one that comes to mind so effortlessly is I was communicating with a horse one time, and it felt really important for him to know whether he was going to be in this home forever or not. And I had reached out to his mom during the session, and she was like, of course. And so I was able to give that to him. And so there's going to be some times where it's going to feel really important for them to have that information. So it's nice for me to know that people are aware of things that are happening, and I can reach out to them if I need to. You can also communicate through cards. So if you are somebody who loves oracle cards or who loves tarot cards, you can communicate with animals through using cards, just like you communicate with your higher self or, the divine, the universe, through using cards as well. So the way that you could use that is you could use cards to communicate is to sit with them and to bring in the intention of communicating with the animal and then asking the question that you're wanting to know, right? Like, what is the animal wanting to tell their person? And then seeing what card comes out or pulling a couple cards, whatever is you're feeling intuitively pulled to, and then seeing what those messages are. If you are somebody who's truly really connected with your cards, you likely don't need the meanings and the messages from the book as much. And if you're new to cards, then you likely will want to see those messages and just see what's calling out to you the most and seeing how things unfold. I know a few people who use cards to communicate with animals, and I think it's magical and I love it. And it's for me, as much as I want it to be a way that I can, it doesn't come easy to me. It's not effortless for me. And every time I do it, I almost feel confused because I'm like, wait, what? So I leave that to the professionals, and that is a way that we can communicate with animals is through cards. Another way is through intuitive writing or drawing, right? And intuitive writing can kind of be like free writing. So I'm going to kind of put these together. So let's do intuitive drawing first. So it might be that you look at the image of an animal and you feel overcome with this picture. And so you draw out this picture, and from this picture, just all of this information comes to you. And you use that image to then converse or convey to the person, here's what your animal wants you to know, right? And allowing that artistic gateway to lead to all of the messages and to lead to what it is that they're wanting to share. And when we talk about like intuitive writing and free writing, it's very similar, right? So you would pull up the image. And when I'm looking at images, I really prefer to have images that I can clearly see their face and their eyes, which can sometimes be difficult to get. And especially at the beginning of my journey, I didn't want any other beings to be in the image as well. So whether it be, a selfie with the person and the animal, or the animal with another animal, that for me was advanced, because now I'm having this other being that is like trying to come in and have a conversation as well, whether it was the person or the other animal. And so now that I've been doing it for a while, it's easier to be able to be like, well, it's not your turn. And like, this is who we're here to communicate with. And yet, it took a long time to be able to set those boundaries and to be able to say, like, not right now, you know? So, with free writing, back to this, pull up the image and then again, ask the question and say the animal's name's Ranger. That's my dog's name. And say, Ranger, what is it that you want your person to know? And then put your pen to paper and just see what comes out and allow it to flow. Again, it's not going to come from your brain. If you feel like you're creating it, then it's likely not coming from the animal. If it comes out of quote unquote nowhere, that's likely more the animal and not you. And I think one of the biggest tasks within not human design, within animal communication, is removing yourself from the process, is getting yourself out of the way so that you can be that conduit, you can be that channel that gets to bring the information through. So those are kind of more the main ways that I see animal communication taking place, right? It's usually in person, over the phone, through meditation, which in person and like over the phone and Zoom are very similar, because it's a conversation that's taking place in the moment with the person, with the animal, whether it's their spirit because it's their image, or their actual physical self is partaking as well. Where meditation is going to be different because you're not interacting likely with the person during that time. And then through cards is a different modality. So you can kind of see how things can unfold a little bit differently. All right. I feel like I've gone overboard a little bit, but hopefully this is helpful, and know that this journey gets to be as short or as long as it's meant to be for you. My first readings with animals were like 2 minutes long. So if you're going into a reading and practice and you are thinking, oh, it didn't last very long, therefore what I got can't be very good, or I'm not good at this because it didn't last very long. We all start somewhere, right? We all get to build upon this gift. We're building a new trust muscle. Just like if you were going to the gym, you're likely going to be sore after the first time because you're building these new muscles. And if you're getting back into running, it's going to take a while to get that endurance. It's the same thing here. So it's building up and knowing that the more we do it, the more we're practicing, the more we're getting feedback from people to say, yes, this resonates. No, this doesn't resonate. The more we're able to fine tune our own gift and our own craft and understand where we're allowing ourselves to get in the way and where we're not, where we're allowing ourselves to be very like open and like removing ourselves from the situation. All right. I hope this is helpful. If you are interested in reconnecting, and I don't like using the word learn because we already know it, it's just a matter of uncovering it and reconnecting with it. But if animal communication is something that you are really interested in and this got you really excited, please reach out to me. I would love to introduce you to my Explore Animal Communication container and how I help support you in understanding how you specifically communicate with animals, and not how I teach you how I do it, because that is unhelpful. Right? Like, it's helpful, like, and that is something I will do. However, my way isn't the only way. And if I'm only supporting you in understanding one way, then we're forgetting so many others. And so please let me know if you are interested. I would so love to welcome you into Explore Animal Communication. It is something that has been birthed from my soul's calling of animal communication and human design, and being able to bring them together so beautifully to help you understand you more. And in the process, being able to connect back with this gift that we all have. We just have forgotten how to use it because we have lived in a society that says we don't need to, right? And we live in a society that doesn't necessarily put a lot of stock in it. And so we don't flex the muscle because we haven't known that we needed to. All right, loves, I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I am sending you so much love. And again, reach out. You can find me on Instagram at emma.in.design. You can find me on my website at connected-consciousness.com. And you can email me at emmaj@connected-consciousness.com. All right. Bye for now.